Good evening. Welcome to Inside City Hall for Tuesday, October 7th, 2025. I'm Errol Lewis. Back in 2001, an endorsement by then Mayor Rudy Giuliani helped propel Michael Bloomberg to an upset victory in the race for mayor. A generation later, the man once known as America's mayor is involved again in City Hall politics, but it's unclear, to say the least, whether his backing of Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa carries the same weight that Giuliani's endorsements did nearly 25 years ago. Our Dan Rivoli joins me now with tonight's top story. Good evening.
Hey, good evening, Errol. So Curtis Sliwa was excited to get Rudy Giuliani's endorsement, hoping that it will burnish his credentials as a law and order candidate and help consolidate Republicans to his campaign, though he does acknowledge that the Rudy Giuliani of 2025, being Donald Trump's lawyer trying to discredit the 2020 election, makes him a lot different than the Rudy Giuliani of 2001 when he was America's mayor.
I almost feel like I'm passing the torch on to you to save New York, Curtis. I am. Here's the torch.
Rudy Giuliani giving his old friend and fellow Republican Curtis Sliwa an endorsement for mayor. Sliwa considered himself Giuliani's apprentice.
I say, think of Rudy Giuliani 2.0. I learned from the best.
Giuliani said he was under pressure to back former Governor Andrew Cuomo in order to unite opposition against Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani. Sliwa has been a distant third in polls, partly because he has not consolidated the Republican and conservative vote. Sliwa thinks Giuliani's support will help.
In all the neighborhoods I go, a lot of them the inner city neighborhoods, they say things were really never better in the streets than when Rudy was mayor.
Sliwa, however, understands that Giuliani, once America's mayor, is now more known as Giuliani, Donald Trump's attorney who got disbarred, sued, and criminally charged for trying to discredit the 2020 election.
I run into people, they don't like Rudy Giuliani because of his politics or what he's done in the time of Donald Trump running for the presidency. But then there are some of the same people who say, but I like what he did in New York to get us back on track, and I'll never forget what he did for us after the attack in 9/11.
Meanwhile, Andrew Cuomo, the Democrat running as an independent, was on Fox 5's Good Day New York. He spent much of the time criticizing Mamdani, a member of the Democratic Socialists of America.
I am a Democrat. My father was a Democrat. Democratic Socialists of America are not Democrats.
But Cuomo also had the chance to pitch his own policies.
First priority, jobs, jobs, jobs. We're losing jobs. We're losing the economy. Second, what I call cop on the block, cop on the train. I want to add 5,000 police officers. You have to build more affordable housing.
The campaigns also put out statements for the second anniversary of October 7th, when Hamas killed more than 1,200 people inside Israel and kidnapped 240 people as hostages. Cuomo offered a message directly to Jewish people, saying, I stand with you, I mourn with you, and vows to fight anti-Semitism in all forms. Mamdani's statement called Hamas's terror attack a horrific war crime and mourned the Israelis killed and kidnapped, praying for hostages' return. Mamdani then characterized Israel's response as launching a genocidal war and called for an end to the occupation. Mamdani's statement made no mention of Jews. And Mamdani's statement on October 7th went viral on the social media platform X, and it got the attention of the account for the Israeli Foreign Ministry. We're going to put that post up, the response to Mamdani, saying that he had chosen to act as a mouthpiece for Hamas propaganda, spreading Hamas's fake genocide campaign, and then going on to say, by repeating Hamas's lies, Mamdani excuses terror and normalizes anti-Semitism. He stands with Jews only when they are dead. Errol.
Wow, that is quite a harsh statement. Do you think Mamdani expected that kind of blowback?
I don't know. I think he had been conscious of the need to put out a statement on October 7th. Some days ago, when there was that terror attack in a synagogue in Manchester on Yom Kippur, he put out a statement late in the afternoon, about 15 minutes or so after Andrew Cuomo on social media called him out for not putting out a statement on that. And you can see how, yes, in local politics, sometimes you comment on world affairs that they have little power over, but as you saw in Manchester, you see some of what's happening in New York, people do expect their mayor and their candidates to make statements on
Yeah, yeah. If he'd said nothing, he'd have been criticized. What he did say, of course, he got criticized anyway. I think that's the nature of this particular dispute on this sad and auspicious day. Thanks very much, Dan. It is not just the battle for city offices that's on the ballot this November. There are also some key housing proposals that could change the future of development in New York City. Supporters say that the changes will fast-track critical new projects, while critics say local involvement could be eliminated. Our Kelly Mena joins us now with a look at where the candidates stand. Good evening.
Good evening, Errol. And all city officials agree that the city is in a housing crisis, but they don't all agree on the same solution. The latest conflict focuses on who would hold the power when it comes to housing developments in the future.
Without communities' voices and power in development decisions, our neighborhoods will get less truly affordable housing.
Local lawmakers say a set of housing proposals set to be on the November ballot are putting at risk the future of community-based housing development in the city. At the heart of the conflict, a set of questions aimed at changing the decades-old land use process.
Mayor Adams' misleading ballot proposals are trying to trick voters into giving away their power by claiming to be about housing. It's not about housing. They're using misleading language that claims they're a solution to the housing crisis when in fact they take away your power to get more affordable housing to developers and unelected appointees chosen by the mayor.
Currently, council members get final approval on new housing development in the city, but under new proposals 2, 3, and 4, they would lose that power. Instead, the final say for certain housing projects would lie with the city's planning commission or a newly created review board consisting of the mayor, borough president, and council speaker. City Council zoning chair Kevin Riley.
Yes, we know we have to build housing, but what about investing in our schools? What about investing in our parks, the streets, the roads? What about adding economic opportunity? This gives us the opportunity to negotiate with those coming in our community.
But supporters of the ballot proposals say the current process is burdensome, with projects taking an average of over 2 years to complete.
We've had multiple iterations of the council over decades that have completely failed to act on housing, in no small part because we have the system where the most small-minded voices can weaponize the system to block this housing that we so desperately need.
2 candidates for mayor have weighed in on the issue, with GOP nominee Curtis Sliwa against the proposals, Andrew Cuomo for them. Democratic nominee Zoran Mamdani is uncommitted. Council members have started passing out palm cards in an effort to defeat the questions, raising concerns that the council is telling New Yorkers how to vote, which is illegal. Former Conflicts of Interest Board Chair Richard Rivoli.
The law doesn't actually say urge. It says designed to urge. And so you could argue that these actually have crossed the line. And so I'll stick with the gray area. It's not clear. They certainly designed them to bump up against the line without crossing it.
Ultimately, local lawmakers argue the current system works and the changes will cut out local needs.
Ballot proposals 2, 3, and 4 are a threat to our communities getting what they deserve.
And there will be a total of 5 ballot proposals on that ballot in November, 4 of which will deal with housing, Errol.
Did any of the members of the council, and I'm thinking of the speaker in particular, acknowledge that there are entire districts where they don't allow anything to get built and that this has been going on for decades?
They did. And it's interesting you mentioned that, Errol, because where they were standing today at Essex Crossing, specifically where you saw in that piece, that place went undeveloped for more than 50 years. And that was a question we posed to them. This is the result of having this idea of member deference. Everybody defers to the member in that district. And after 50 years, the housing finally came. And their response was, well, it did come with this park and these other community benefits that we were able to secure. But I mean, that is really the goal of these ballot proposals, is to override and try to push back against what has been going on here for so many years and gotten us to this housing crisis we are in now.
All right. Thanks very much, Kelly. I'm going to be talking more about these housing ballot measures when I'm joined by James Whalen, the president of the Real Estate Board of New York, later in tonight's show. Campaign spending by independent groups dominated the primary for mayor, and even though they have not been doling out as much cash for the general election, these groups are still playing a significant role. Our Courtney Gross crunched the numbers and has that part of our story.
Mamdani is a risk we can't afford.
It was the soundtrack of the Democratic mayoral primary earlier this summer, where a major super PAC supporting Andrew Cuomo spent tens of millions of dollars unsuccessfully trying to defeat Zoran Mamdani.
So, unlike Andrew Cuomo, I actually follow the law.
A review of recent spending by these independent expenditure committees so far in the general election shows they are spending a fraction of what they had during the primary, just over $2 million so far. The vast majority of it is focused on attacking Mamdani.
Mamdani's viral posts might be catchy,
but his inexperience will be chaos.
The super PAC supporting Andrew Cuomo, known as Fix the City, has raised nearly $3.4 million since the primary and has spent more than $785,000, much less than what it had during the primary. The largest contribution post-primary coming from billionaire and former 1989 mayoral candidate Ron Lauder. Some of the cash has gone toward digital ads, highlighting Mamdani's inexperience.
He is being funded by Trump-supporting billionaires, by the very people that have funded Donald Trump's return to the White House. I cannot think of a single Trump-supporting billionaire that is looking to even entertain the prospect of supporting my campaign.
He said billionaires shouldn't exist. Then he takes contributions from billionaires.
Cuomo has been trying to flip the script, attacking Mamdani for a super PAC supporting his candidacy.
That is dirty money.
That group, New Yorkers for Lower Costs, has raised nearly $1.2 million and spent just over $300,000. Last week, Cuomo accused it of having anti-Israel ties.
His PAC took $100,000 from the Council on American Islamic Relations Unity and Justice Fund, an organization whose leader said that he was, quote, happy about October 7th.
An independent expenditure, when it comes to me, is actually independent, as opposed to Andrew Cuomo, who was fined hundreds of thousands of dollars by the Campaign Finance Board for illegally coordinating with that very super PAC.
An official at the council said there is no connection between it and the PAC, and New Yorkers for Lower Costs did not return a request for comment. These groups, by law, must operate independently from these mayoral campaigns, and they cannot coordinate. New Yorkers for Lower Costs has been spending much of its cash on text messages and digital ads, and some merchandise, including this pair of shorts. Courtney Gross, New York 1.
We're going to take a short break here. We've got a packed show for you tonight. Coming up, we'll turn our focus to Midtown and how office to housing conversions are transforming the heart of Manhattan. We'll bring you those details. And then, as I mentioned, we will talk more about the issue of housing in the race for mayor with the president of the Real Estate Board of New York. Later on tonight, I'll speak with a reporter from Documented about the impact of South Asian voters in this election. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. In this week's neighborhood series, we are focusing on Midtown Manhattan, which is full of tourist attractions. You've got Broadway and Rockefeller Center. You've got transit hubs like Penn Station and Grand Central Terminal that deposit commuters heading into office buildings. But lawmakers and real estate developers say that new zoning laws could spur construction of new housing, transforming what were commercial areas into a residential zone. Our Bernadette Hogan joins me now with more on this. Good evening, Bernadette.
Good evening, Errol. So you have tourists, commuters from New Jersey, from Westchester, Long Island. They all get deposited into what's known as Midtown. And although there are people that do live in this neighborhood, developers and city officials are trying to make this more of a place that New Yorkers can call home.
Midtown Manhattan. Home to iconic New York City scenes, Times Square, Rockefeller Center, and the Empire State Building.
This is the front door for the city to the entire world.
It's where tourists, commuters, and New Yorkers buy tickets to Broadway shows, shop along Fifth Avenue, and complain about riding the subway or how much more congestion pricing is hitting their wallets.
It's so important that we keep it safe and keep it clean and we take care of it, but it really is the heartbeat.
Midtown's borders generally start on the east side's 3rd Avenue, extending to 8th Avenue, halting at Penn Station. The southern border is considered 34th Street. The northern end is the bottom of Central Park at 59th Street. Housing data from New York University's Furman Center shows Midtown's population stands at over 121,000 people, is majority white, and about a third make a 6-figure income.
It's not known as a residential community, but that is changing. We're seeing office conversions come online. We're seeing new residential buildings being built and more mixed use communities here.
Despite the city's record low 1.4% vacancy rate, new construction is ramping up.
About 15 years ago, And that was the last major construction we were able to do in Manhattan because land got too expensive. We've been largely developing in Long Island City and Brooklyn for the last decade.
At 135 East 57th Street, TF Cornerstone is converting a 32-story office building into 400 new rental apartments, including 100 affordable units, thanks to new state and city laws. Developer Jeremy Schell says City of Yes zoning reforms make it easier for new construction on old buildings.
We couldn't convert all of the floor space in this building to residential as of right. City of Yes was passed, and now we could take the full square footage of this building and convert it to residential.
The real estate industry argues the expiration of developer incentives froze new housing construction over the last several years, largely blaming Albany Democrats.
Creating the programs and having stability within those programs, not changing the programs over time. And frankly, it's very expensive to build in New York. It's complicated to build in New York City. The cost of labor, materials, and land and buildings is extraordinary.
Also, in Midtown South, there's a plan to convert older offices into 10,000 new apartments. Politicians say this means more focus on creating green space is a must.
We need a 24/7 community here.
Despite the planned transformation, local Assemblyman Tony Simone argues City Hall cannot neglect the large homeless and mentally ill population.
There's nothing progressive, nothing positive about letting someone unhoused in the street not be treated with mental health workers or medication or housing.
He backed changes to New York's involuntary commitment law and has pending legislation aimed at helping those too mentally ill to stand trial.
So talking to these lawmakers, you have the whole host of issues. You have homelessness, mental health, crime in a predominantly commercial district, but everybody sees it, right? You have people from Ireland and England coming in saying, what's going on here? But now they're trying to make this more of a residential conversion, especially in the wake of the pandemic, when you have a bunch of people working from home and you have older housing stock.
Well, yeah, little by little, it really will transform the area. If you take big commercial buildings like the one you were in and convert them into apartments, that's hundreds and hundreds and eventually thousands more people who will start to demand the kind of things that people want in a residential area.
Right, and especially if you look at, I guess, where people are living in the wake of the pandemic, you have these Brooklyn communities and Queens where, maybe people wouldn't have moved to if they, were working in Manhattan, they tried to live near where they worked. I was walking outside of Penn Station and just right around MSG, the Madison Square Garden, there's a bunch of new restaurants and a walking corridor that, I really try to avoid that area. But if I'm going to a store, I walk through. And those are some of the developments that, a Tony Simone or Keith Powers have been trying to push for that area.
Right. And then, of course, look, the expense of conversion from the outside, those of us who are not in this business, you say, hey, you could just turn it into apartments. But a commercial building might have 2 bathrooms on an entire floor, but residential, you've got to put in 8 bathrooms on that same floor.
Right, and it also depends on how wide the building itself is. If you have too wide of a space, it's kind of impossible or maybe not the right spot to chop it up into apartments. What's different about that building on East 57th is that it just being inside of it, it's kind of squeezed. So walking through it, there's windows on either side. They're planning on getting rid of the windows and just, chopping it up. But I asked Jeremy Schell, the developer, would you have chosen this location if it wasn't shaped this way? And he said no.
Very interesting. Thanks very much, Bernadette. We are going to take a break now, and when we come back, the Canadian Prime Minister visited the White House today, where he had trade talks with President Trump. We'll bring you those details in 2 minutes. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. The Prime Minister of Canada returned to Washington, D.C. to meet again with President Donald Trump. The two men appear to get along well, but their countries remain locked in a back and forth over tariffs and trade. Spectrum News national political reporter Taylor Popolars has the latest from the White House.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney visited the White House Tuesday for the second time since taking office in March. He and President Donald Trump maintaining a good relationship so far.
He is a world-class leader. He's a man that knows what he wants.
But the two men remain at odds over trade.
We have natural conflict. We also have mutual love.
Conflict, maybe not so much conflict. We compete. There are areas where we compete, and it's in those areas where we have to come to an agreement that works.
The Trump administration has kept a 35% tariff on most imports from Canada not protected by the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement Trump reached in his first term. Canadian steel and aluminum face a 50% tariff, and lumber 45%. In response, Canada has imposed a 25% tariff on imports of steel, aluminum, and cars from the U.S. Carney emphasized the historical relationship between the U.S. and its northern neighbor.
We are the second largest trading partner of the United States. We do a lot of trade going across the border where we're cooperating, first thing. Secondly, we are the largest foreign investor in the United States.
Trump said the most complex trade deal he's pursuing is with Canada.
The problem we have is that they want a car company and I want a car company, meaning the U.S. wants a car company. And they want steel and we want steel.
Although President Trump continued to joke that Canada should become the 51st state, Tuesday's meeting in no way appeared contentious. The president and prime minister seem to have a much stronger relationship than Carney's predecessor, Justin Trudeau, had with President Trump. Reporting at the White House, Taylor Popolars, Spectrum News.
It is time for a break. Coming up, I'll be joined live in studio by Jim Whalen. He is the president of the Real Estate Board of New York. We're going to talk about the race for mayor, the city's affordable housing crisis, and more. Stay with us.
When it comes to a rent freeze, we are speaking about $1,750 saved every single year. And together that amounts to more than $1.7 billion in its first year. These are the figures that add up in the lives of New Yorkers.
Freeze the rent applies only to rent-stabilized apartments. It's illegal for the mayor just to say, I'm going to freeze the rent.
You must cut the taxes right across the board. Property tax is one thing a mayor immediately controls. Homeowners need relief.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall. As you just saw, housing and affordability remain top issues in the race for mayor. While Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani has vowed to freeze the rents of tenants in rent-stabilized units, his opponents have been skeptical of that proposal. But no matter where they stand, each candidate has acknowledged the importance of addressing the shortage of affordable apartments throughout the 5 boroughs. Housing is also on the ballot in the form of 3 separate proposals that deal with the land use and review process. Joining me now to talk about what all of this will mean is James Whalen. He is president of the Real Estate Board of New York. Welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Great seeing you again, Errol.
From Rebney's point of view, how did we get to the current affordability crisis in housing?
Well, it's played out over time, and in some respects, you could argue we're a victim of our own success. You're a lifelong New Yorker like I. You think back to the days of the 70s and 80s, and the city's terrific growth since that period. And one fundamental issue is that job growth has far outstripped housing production. On top of that, there have been some key mistakes by government in the last few years. The rent reforms referred to as HSTPA in 2019 went way too far and has caused part of the crisis. Last year, there was a missed opportunity in replacing 421A with the program 485X that really it looks like it's not going to perform anywhere near 421A. With that said, there are signs of hope. City and state have done some really good things in the past 2 years at the state level, extending the completion deadline for 421A, lifting the cap that had existed on residential zoning for the longest time, and then creating an incentive for creating below market rate units in office conversions, 467M. And then on the city side, City of Yes was a huge success. And the mayor and his team, led by Dan Garodnick, have done some really great things in terms of planning for the city's future with rezonings like Midtown South recently.
Okay, so with the rezonings, whether it's City of Yes or some of these other ones, it'll still take a while to build out, right? I mean, it'll take like a decade or so to really sort of reach its potential. Have we run out of time? I mean, what happens in the meantime?
Well, it took us a while to get into this situation. It's going to take us a little while to get out. And the key thing moving forward are policymakers on a city and state level going to make sensible decisions that start to reverse the problems we're facing. For example, there's a much discussed proposal to freeze rent and direct guideline board. That is exactly the type of direction we should not be going in. If we go in that direction, it's just one of several examples where we're going to have a city 4 years from now that's less affordable than it is today.
Explain that. Why do you say that?
Well, with the rent law changes in 2019, the only practical way that rent-regulated owners can increase their revenue is through raising the rents. But at the same time, expenses have gone up exponentially, one in part due to inflation, taxes, fuel, and et cetera. So what's happening is, in that part of the rent-regulated market where you have buildings that have high concentration of rent-regulated units, they are in a financial and operational debt spiral. And so if you come along and then shut off that last spigot of being able to pay for your expenses, what's going to happen is more and more units taken offline, less housing available, more situations where owners are going to go back to the banks and say, hey, here's the keys, we're done.
Does Rebney have a proposal on how to help some of these functionally bankrupt buildings?
Yeah, I mean, last year as part of the housing deal, what we sought to do was make adjustments to IAIs and MCIs. These are programs that help owners go in and fix up units that need to be restored, fix up buildings. There were minor changes to IAIs, but it did not really move the ball forward at all.
What's the, are you endorsing candidates?
No, Rebney does not endorse candidates.
I mean, do you have a PAC or an affiliated group or a politically engaged affiliate of some kind?
Yeah, I mean, we have a political action committee. Yeah. We have a few political action committees. We have an independent expenditure.
I see. And are any of those acting in support of any of the candidates?
Not during the general election.
Okay. So what does the next mayor and council need to do? I mean, whoever that might be.
On a housing front? To be fair, to really continue what Mayor Adams has done in many respects. He's really been a champion of affordable housing, using the bully pulpit, trying to focus the city's resources, really sort of making this a priority. A key part of this is going to be advocacy in Albany, because they determine a lot of the levers when it comes to what housing policy is in New York City.
Do you support passage, does Rebney support passage of the charter amendment questions that'll be on the ballot?
We do. We think the commission did a very thoughtful job putting forward a series of, very prescribed measures to promote affordable housing. I think there's two things to note. The housing challenge in New York City is so broad and so vast, there's no single answer. Like, for example, we have to address rent-regulated housing. We have to fix a program like 485X. We have to do more on supportive services and supportive housing. What the commission has put forward here is a series of tools to help promote affordable housing. And the other thing to note is, while this city council speaker and this council, I think, have really done a commendable job when it comes to housing policy and affordable housing, I really don't think City of Yes would have gotten done without the leadership of City Council Speaker Adrian Adams. We don't know who the future City Council speakers and the future City Council members are going to be. And the proposals put forward by the Commission have really been tailored to focus on affordable housing.
I was speaking earlier with Christine Quinn, who runs WIN, the largest provider of shelter for homeless families that have children. And she said that she actually kind of works in alliance with Rebney for supportive housing. Now, I know you personally are a very nice guy, but Rebney is not a charitable organization. Explain the business argument for making more supportive housing available for New York.
Well, a few things. Last time you had me on the show was with Christine Quinn, because we did a report together about how the city can better administer the voucher program. And I was very happy to work with Christine and other organizations this past state legislative session to get the governor and legislative leaders to start to fund a statewide voucher program. Why? Because it really gets at the relationship between the real estate and New York City, the real estate community in New York City. There is not a scenario where New York City does well and the real estate industry doesn't, and vice versa. So in that sense, while members of the real estate industry may have their preferences to who the next mayor is, we as an organization will be prepared to work with who's ever elected mayor, and it's in our interest, whoever that mayor is, to succeed. So to get back to your specific question, when it comes to business recruitment, for example, one of the key issues cited is the lack of available housing in New York City. And it's something that needs to be addressed. And as I outlined before, there's not one single answer. There's got to be a multiplicity of approaches. Housing vouchers, for example, is part of the answer.
Yeah, and when we see what's coming down from Washington, possibly from Albany, that there's going to be tightened budgets, maybe less money available for certain kinds of supportive housing, social service supports, and frankly, housing production. What's that going to mean?
Number one, city and state governments are really going to have to look to see what they can do to tighten their belts. I mean, for instance, Citizens Budget Commission came out with a survey recently, and one of the punchlines of the survey is the public doesn't really feel like it's getting its money's worth for government services. And I don't think a good hard look has been taken at some city agencies and state agencies as to possibly how they can run more efficiently. But number two is organizations like us working in coalition with others to push for more funding from a federal level and to see if there's new ways to approach tackling some of these issues.
When it comes to some of the drivers of high rents, we've heard from other industry experts who in particular cite property taxes and cite insurance as some of the drivers of the high rents that are hurting so many New York families. Do you guys have a solution? Does Rebney have a solution to that or a proposal?
Well, yes. On the first one, with respect to property taxes, I mean, one of the many things wrong with the city's property tax system is, in essence, it punishes you for building and owning rental housing. A typical multifamily rental housing, if it doesn't have a tax abatement, pays about 30% of its gross income to taxes. And it's kind of ironic because rental housing is the most important housing in New York City. Litigation has been brought on this issue. Some members of the community, or the real estate community, are part of that litigation, along with a broad array of community groups. It was successful at the Court of Appeals, the state's highest court, and the findings of the state's highest court was that the city can fix this. So it's going back to the trial court level soon, and hopefully. That's going to go in the right direction and start to provide some solutions here for rental owners.
Okay, we'll be watching that and watching how all of this works out for the election. Thanks so much for coming by.
Errol, it was great to see you.
All right, let's take a break now. When we come back, the three candidates for mayor have different plans for how to improve transit in our city. We'll break down each of their views in a special report in 2 minutes. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Transportation issues have been a point of contention in the race for mayor, although New York's mayor has only limited control over subways and buses. The mayor can, however, implement policies to make the streets and the subways safer, as well as address transportation affordability. New York One Transit reporter Samantha Liebman has more on what each candidate says they will do if elected.
Fast and free. That's the dream for many who rely on MTA buses, and it's a major policy proposal for Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee for mayor. He cites the free bus pilot on 5 routes last year he helped pass in the assembly, which brought an increase in riders, many low income. Despite it becoming too expensive to continue in other cities which have tried it, Mamdani says it can be done, though it would take money from Albany, and the governor has said she won't raise taxes.
I am confident in our ability to deliver a bus system that is not only fast but also free. And I am confident in that while also believing in the necessity of improving our fair fares program.
But Andrew Cuomo asks why subsidize the wealthy, and also points to the fact that more people ride the subway than bus.
I propose a 100% subsidy for low-income New Yorkers on both buses and subways.
The Fair Fares program currently covers half the fare. Eligibility requires someone make 150% of the federal poverty level, which advocates say should be 200%. The mayor does have the power to change that and fund the program. Curtis Sliwa, however, has a different approach centered on cracking down on fare evasion.
Half the people don't pay their bus fare to begin with. 1/3 don't pay their subway fare. How about actually enforcement?
Sliwa and Cuomo have both proposed ramping up police in the subway.
I've called for 5,000 additional police to be hired, 1,500 in the subways.
Sliwa says the NYPD needs to reinstate its homeless outreach unit. As for safety above ground, mayors have a lot of control. Sliwa says he'd eliminate speed cameras in favor of speed bumps and find a middle ground on universal daylighting of intersections.
Some people have said you should leave them 20 feet off of the corners in order to give both the pedestrian an option to see the cars coming and the drivers too. I would say 10 feet.
As for e-bikes, Sliwa wants more enforcement, while Mamdani promises better protected bike infrastructure, hardened universal daylighting, putting immovable objects in that space, more pedestrian space, along with more bus lanes. And in Manhattan, he's calling for busways, which exclude cars for the most part on every major east-west artery, also part of the plan to speed up buses. As for Cuomo, we reached out on several occasions for his proposals for street safety and better transit.
Let me get you those plans.
We have yet to receive them. Samantha Leapman, New York 1.
It is time for a break. Coming up next, will South Asian voters once again help Zohran Mamdani across the finish line on Election Day? I'm going to talk about this key voting block with a reporter from the news site Documented. That's coming up next. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside City Hall, where we are turning back to the race for mayor. If Zohran Mamdani prevails in the three-way contest next month, he would make history as our city's first ever South Asian and Muslim mayor. In June, the city's South Asian community came out in big numbers to support Mamdani in the Democratic primary. Some of them voters who sat out previous elections. But will this support from these communities hold? Mamdani is currently facing some backlash from Hindu nationalist groups here in the city who are trying to paint him as anti-Hindu. Joining me now to talk about the politics within the South Asian community and the South Asian vote in general is Prajwal Bhatt. He has been covering this beat for the news site Documented. Very nice to meet you. Great to see you.
That's
in a recent article, you wrote about these Islamophobic attacks that Mamdani is experiencing from some Hindu nationalist groups. They're saying he's anti-Hindu because he has criticized the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. They've spent thousands of dollars. How is this entirely domestic? Does it have a sort of an overseas source, do you think?
It's not entirely domestic in the sense it's not just from New York. There is a small community of Indians that lives in Outer Queens, which have talked about Mamdani and talked about his anti-Hindu views. But the majority of the money that has been spent was by two individuals in New Jersey who believe that they need to make this point. But before we get into the fact that there is an opposition, we need to acknowledge the fact that South Asians, being such a visible and central part of the election campaign this year is a significant development in New York politics. It's the fact that in the past you could see that Italian or Irish immigrants were a crucial vote, that this time you see that the political power of South Asian communities is coming to the fore. And it's not just the creatives or the technical class from Astoria or Greenpoint that's been voting. It's also the people who are, everyday New Yorkers, who have been restaurant workers, who have been taxi drivers, who came out in big numbers to campaign for Mamdani and vote for him.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that, because you, in your writings, you've identified sort of almost a prior generation who came in the 1960s. They tended to be college educated, much more professional, higher incomes. That's not who many of us see. Who we see now are the cab drivers, the security workers, the nurses, and so forth.
Yeah, there is a large number of working class population from South Asia living in New York City that has been making the city tick for generations. And Zohran Mamdani has had a connection to this diaspora population. He has been part of a hunger strike that's been, that was campaigning for debt relief for taxi drivers. He has spoken up about the redistricting of Punjabi neighborhoods in Richmond Hill. So we're talking about a population that's living, fragmented in the city. Now, you talk about this and you sense that there is a population of Bangladeshi Americans in Kensington in Brooklyn. There's a population of Bangladeshis in Parkchester in the Bronx. There's a population of Pakistanis in Midwood in Brooklyn, which voted in big numbers for Mamdani. And if you look at the election maps closely, you will see a small triangular area in Midwood in Brooklyn where the Pakistani community came out and voted for Zohran. And there's a huge swathe of area outside of it and in neighboring to it where it's a Jewish neighborhood, and it voted primarily for Cuomo. So Mamdani's campaign has done a great job of, getting these communities to be active in New York City politics. And this is, I think, the first time we're seeing something like this.
Okay. Let me play a clip from my last interview with him. I talked with him about these folks who had rented an airplane and were flying banners and sort of encouraging people not to vote for him. Here's what he had to say about that.
I know that also I'm looking to represent the entirety of New York City. Just yesterday, I had an incredible meeting with Hindu leaders across New York City. And we spoke about a wide-ranging set of topics. We spoke about small businesses, we spoke about Diwali, and we also spoke about that we may have disagreements as it pertained to Prime Minister Modi. And those disagreements do not preclude us from working together to the benefit of this city.
So he's kind of working the politics of his community as any politician would do. Is he enjoying some success there?
I think so. I think if you look at primary victory, this group that we're talking about that's been opposing Mamdani, they were active before the primary, but they did not have a material effect on the primary. So they've created a lot of noise. There's been a racist and Islamophobic rhetoric to some of the noise that they've created, and it has been happening in the last 2 months that they've been waging a campaign to try and say that Zoran Mamdani is anti-Hindu. But the main bone of contention seems to be comments he made about Prime Minister Modi and also some anti-Hindu slurs that were said. So Mamdani himself did not say these slurs, and the contention from them is that he's not condemned them enough, and it was said in the background of interview that he was doing. But I don't think that it's had a significant effect on New Yorkers who are voting in the elections, and there's nothing to suggest that Mamdani's popularity is any lesser. He was a big part of the celebrations of the Indian community in the Indian Independence Day in August, and he came out to Outer Queens, and where a lot of these affluent Hindu supporters who would, some of whom were raising these objections against Mamdani were present. But at the same time, a lot of them were lining up for selfies and photos with him. So as on a personal level, when people get to know about Mamdani, they definitely don't seem to be, coming at him gung-ho with these views.
Well, yeah, and worth pointing out, because you've reported on at least one person who is a straight-up extremist, right? I mean, by anybody's definition, and is on lists as having, sort of advocated really extreme rhetoric that could even lead to violence. The city has roughly 450,000 South Asian voters. What issues are most important, other than favorite son status and the fact that he emerges from that community?
The community has been talking about a lot of things. So you can't, you'll have to bifurcate this by national origin, because the Bangladeshi community has been talking about Win Rosario, someone who's been shot dead by the NYPD, and 2 officers were served misconduct charges in this case. And Zoran Mamdani has been speaking about, setting up a department which responds to 911 calls with mental health professionals and not police officers. So this is something that the Bangladeshi community has been actively speaking up about. And we saw a protest in Jackson Heights just last week. Apart from that, there's also been, the redistricting of Richmond Hill, Punjabi areas that Mamdani has spoken about. But more than that, I think not a lot of the South Asian community lives in rent-stabilized apartments, but a lot of them do resonate with the message of affordability that Zoran has been talking about.
Yeah.
So because a lot of them are working-class citizens, are working, to make ends meet, and the fact that it's not only somebody that they can identify with who speaks their language. He has done campaign ads in Bengali and Urdu as well, and he speaks quite good Hindi and Urdu. I've noticed in my interviews with him. So it's not just the fact that they relate with him, but it's also that his politics is great, because Jennifer Rajkumar, if you remember, it was also a South Asian who was up for public advocate in June, but she lost handsomely. So it's also about, the kind of socialist politics that he's been advocating for that's been resonating.
Oh, interesting. Are you saying the same South Asian community did not rally to support her at the same time as they were voting for Mamdani?
Exactly. And it is also because Mamdani comes across as somebody who can unite these different South Asian identities much better than someone else like Jennifer, for example. Because we are talking about 5 different countries and so many different religions and cultures. So Mamdani, the fact that he can speak these different languages, the fact that he can carry these messages in different ways has helped him.
Okay, an intra-group diplomat, one more skill that will, I guess, stand him in good stead as we get closer to Election Day. Thanks so much for coming by. Great talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me
over.
over.
That is going to do it for tonight's show. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great evening. We'll see you next time inside City Hall.